When Battlefield 5 released, EA started in the red zone due to all the bad press they had accrued regarding various PR missteps and troubles along the way. It was without a shadow of a doubt one of the most controversial games in recent memory. I, though, wanted to give this game a fair shake, regardless of what I thought about EA and all the mishaps leading up to its controversial launch. And yeah, they were hella wrong. I decided to play the absolute hell out of this game every day since it came out, even when I didn't want to. I felt compelled to explore the game completely and find out what the game was really all about, especially because I had been with the franchise for so long. Most importantly though, I wanted to answer one simple question. Why can't they just get Battlefield right? It's clear that BF5 is not succeeding, which is evident in the lack of total server counts, the quantity of players in them, and the queue times required to enter matches, basically for all modes, even during peak hours. This is supported by common knowledge by now that the total sales counts for BF5 are incredibly low, though this has probably the potential to be skewed by those who subscribe to Origin Access Premier. But still, the game doesn't feel booming, and it's not uncommon to wait up to 3 minutes to play a game of Conquest. But I kept playing, and at the end of the rainbow, I tried to love Battlefield 5, but I just can't. I'm currently max level in BF5 and maxed out in Assault, Support, and Medic, which are the 3 classes I play. I've also completed all the Tides of War content at each opportunity. I've taken an extensive look at all the game modes and poured several hours into competitive matches each day since the game came out, like I said. And as far as I can tell, BF5 has 3 main issues that are holding it back. But before I go any further, I want to point out the positives to the game first, in depth. Firstly, the gunplay is great, but that's not to be mistaken with the word gameplay, because that's a much different story. Gameplay encompasses how the game actually plays out, not just the mechanics of the guns. All the guns, though, they do feel incredibly slick, and the detail of their animations, from the motion of the guns, the fidelity, and the small touches such as this reload animation of the revolver, are way above anything we've seen from a first-person shooter, so we gotta give them kudos right out of the gate. The guns are fun to use too, and the shooting is as good as any game on the market, and that's one of the most important qualities of a first-person shooter. Secondly, the movement system is not only incredibly impressive, but also incredibly functional. The revamped animation system that allows you to crouch run, slide, crawl, move backwards while prone, and peek naturally around corners is extremely advanced and really well integrated. Not only does it feel good, but it's, like I said, integrated nicely into the game, and I found myself interacting with these systems all the time. Many actions can also be linked together, which is really cool, such as doing a jump with the spacebar and then quickly tapping XX on a keyboard if you're playing on the PC while you're in midair, which is the button combination needed to slide. What's going to happen is you're going to jump and then slide all in one motion, similar to kind of like linking a combo in a fighting game. It's really cool. The movement system is only hampered by clipping issues when geometry gets in the way, which also has an impact on other elements in the game, such as reviving teammates through walls, which looks really weird, and a fussy interact button that doesn't give enough leeway to the player when he wants to go and interact with something like the revive mechanic. But why it works in the first place is that the compact nature of the maps force you to engage with those movement options all the time. Some of the control points have or are connected by trenches, which beg you to crouch run through them to avoid detection. Infantry-focused maps are laden with buildings, broken down tanks, boxes, and other static doodads that you can slide into cover, peek naturally over that cover, or utilize a bipod at the proper height, which is really important. I wish they just fixed the fussy nature of the bipoding in general, because it's kind of hard to use and it doesn't work all the time, but I guess that's a different story. Back on point though, Battlefield 5's maps are also riddled with choke points, which if you find yourself in the crosshairs of a machine gunner, then you can just go prone and avoid his fire. This attention to detail makes the player action system not only flashy and slick, but also, like I said, quite functional. Lastly, the graphics and sound are phenomenal, which is to be expected. Class identity, which is the purpose on the battlefield for each class, and class balance are also quite good. Now though, not at launch when support was extremely overpowered. Vehicles are also appropriately balanced, which is a welcome change from the chaos tanks could unleash in Battlefield 1. I absolutely hated that. And the new revive mechanic with the medics is absolutely groundbreaking considering how unbalanced non-squad pickups were on maps like Operation Metro and Battlefield 3. Outside of a really nice interface and a huge array of cool music in the menu, that's kind of it though for the positives. Problem number one with BF5 is that the maps are at an all-time low, and maps make or break the game. Not only are the maps in BF5 extremely small when measured in square feet, but most of them have very little structural personality. Take for instance Panzerstorm, which is one of the game's largest maps. It's a giant field with control points in it, with little cover for infantry players, especially when half of it has been blown off the face of the earth by the insane amount of tanks that spawn into it. There's really no landmarks outside of a church or several barn-like buildings or a pigsty that are affixed to each control point. It's just one large ocean of a map suited for one thing, and that thing is tanks. The beauty of the best Battlefield maps, though, is that they're suited for all playstyles, and have incredibly iconic vistas, landmarks, and capital control points like Dam of Van Peak in Battlefield 3. Contrast Panzerstorm against some of the other notable large maps in Battlefield's rich history. For instance, in Battlefield 3, players were given a similar large playground-style map called Operation Firestorm, except it was 10 times better. There were huge industrial factories, stacks of smoke pouring into the sky, and the blazes of fires burning out into the distance. Each control point had lots of cover and buildings, and the connecting roads and hills among control points also had lots of cover and buildings. It wasn't just a huge land of dirt. Another great comparison to make is Caspian Border, Battlefield 3's large and iconic forest-style map. Once again, a large map like Panzerstorm, but it had so much more geometry. It also had a great deal of natural topography, something that the incredibly flat Panzerstorm never bothered to deliver. In the middle of the map, there's a large hill leading to a really cool control point, which dips down into a riverbed and then extends down a large forest towards another control point. There's a lot of diversity to this map, and it's one of the all-time greats. It's not just a blob of land. The only map that comes close is probably something like Arras, which is the French map dotted with yellow flowers, a large church connecting buildings in tight quarter spaces, a patch of vineyards, and a small bridge leading to control point B. It's a good map, but there's just not that many good maps to go around. The other fantastic map, in my opinion, is Fiel 652, or Mount Everest as I call it. While it's small and infantry and planes only, it has a nice wraparound feel to it and plenty of cool control points, personality, and flexibility to approach it with whatever class you want to. Unfortunately, that's where it ends. The rest of the map pool has some of the weakest maps in Battlefield's history, including Hamada, which feels like an absolute fucking chore to play on. Then you got Rotterdam and Narvik from the beta, which are two of the worst maps in the game, and Devastation, which is by far the most frustrating map to play on. It's basically a map that invites the most annoying campers in the world to huddle around corners and hide under debris, which is the color of their base uniforms, and mow you down with laser-accurate machine guns. And as far as Twisted Steel, I'll give it a pass because the scale of that dam bridge is pretty impressive. But taken collectively, this map pool is pretty terrible. I assume this new small, tight, clusterfucky for the small maps or featureless design for the large ones was made to just appeal to casual players who want to get into the action quickly or get some kills in a tank without having to think. Compared to the genius of Wake Island, Parcel Storm, which is my personal favorite map of all time, Oasis, Strike at Karkand, or some of the other amazing Eastern-style maps from the Vietnam expansion in Battlefield Bad Company 2, this is a joke. The maps aren't terrible in the short term, but when played extensively, their flaws come out fast. The more annoying part, though, is that because there are so few servers, you might not get to play on the one you want, or worse, be forced into the auto matchmaking tool. This results in a game of roulette, and often you play on a map you don't like because there are more bad maps than good ones. The main issue with this is that without dedicated DLC, which traditionally brings in like 3 or 4 maps per expansion, which is every couple months, the only new maps we're going to get is with Turning Tides and at the discretion of EA. It's incredibly possible that means that we'll get like 1 new map every 3 months, and by that time I think most people will be beyond bored. The worst part about it is that these maps are not designed for any one game mode in particular, which they should be. Each map in BF5 was built to be playable in all modes: Conquest, Grand Operations, Domination, Team Deathmatch, Breakthrough, etc. I miss the days when Rush was in Battlefield 5, which is a far superior mode to Breakthrough in my opinion because you can arm and destroy control points without any succession. I'll never understand why Rush was removed from Battlefield in the first place. It doesn't make any sense. The only explanation for the lack of rush and the homogenization of level design among game modes is that DICE is simply being beat to death with a spiked whip in order to crank out these games like they're the hamster on the wheel. As a result, the maps feel underwhelming, and because the total experience is a combination of how matches play out, how many vehicles we get to play with, where the control points are, and the impact to the ticket system, it makes the maps feel really underwhelming. The second issue with BF5 is progression, gun selection, tides of war, and assignments. While I do enjoy general gunplay in this game, which is the weight and feel of shooting, there's too much bitch work that goes into unlocking cosmetics in this game, and the rewards feel so underwhelming. Each gun in BF5 starts out at level 1, and you have to get that fucker to level 10. During this, you can unlock a few colors for it, in addition to completing some assignments to get you some additional cosmetics like maybe a mint or blue tint for your stock, for instance. The problem is that most assignment progressions are relatively the same with each gun in each class. You'll go through a huge tree of proficiencies with each gun, which require you to shoot, kill, or damage X amount of enemies to advance on to the next one. So you go on to the next one. You kill 20 more people with the MP28 while hip firing to get a different color muzzle. Then you go on to the next one. You kill 20 more people within one round to get a mint stock for your MP28. Then you go on to the next one. Now get 3,000 points of damage to get the mint barrel. Now kill 20 people. You get the point. It wouldn't be so bad, but there's like 10 to 15 assignments for each gun, and at the end of the rainbow, you get like 2 skins, and they're all the same for each gun usually. And then you do the same process all over again for each proficiency assignment for each class. It feels like so much bitch work. Each gun in BF5 has relatively the same color and assignment progression, and completing the assignments really gets old quick. Each gun should have had unique colors and assignments to make the experience actually fun. It's boring and it all blends together. Now as for the guns themselves, there are a respectable amount of guns per class, however not nearly as many as other games in the franchise such as BF4. What guns there are though are nearly interchangeable, which is the big problem in this game, which makes the feeling of gun selection sparse at best. My favorite gun on the medic is the MP28, but any other medic gun would be a perfectly fine substitute, as they all seem to perform relatively the same. They look the same and sound the same too. Outside of some differences in numbers, there's really not much to set them apart from one another. The way they look, the way they sound, the way they feel. The same problem exists with Assault, where each automatic rifle is pretty similar to the other ones, and the same goes for the semi-automatic rifles, and Support too, where again it's just a game of which gun has slightly less recoil, slightly less damage, or slightly faster reload time than the others. Does it sound exciting? Not really. I understand that the time period of this game does limit the development of gun variety, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have explored other options to make the arsenal more interesting or varied, such as giving the medic class access to more types of guns than just one, SMG. Speaking of variety, the in-game coin progression is one of the worst in the franchise. Not only do you not get enough coin per game, or whatever the hell the currency is called, but DICE has been hiding the most rewarding assignments behind specific game modes like Airborne, which I don't even want to play. This is where Tides of War ladder assignments go wrong. While I appreciate the new content each progression cycle, some of the required assignments for completion are again locked behind certain game modes. In the recent update to get the AGM-42, there was 3 assignments set within Grand Operations, which is another mode I can't stand. It took me the better part of 6 hours to get this gun, because the final objective was to win a game of Grand Operations, which can take forever. I'm not a fan of locking time content behind specific game modes that people may or may not want to play. I'm assuming they're doing this so they can make sure that less populated modes get a player bump, but if this is the case, then perhaps those game modes weren't well designed in the first place. There's also problems with the amount of content in the store, which only has a handful of things to choose from to spend your coins on. Why is this shop so bare bones? This mirrors the incomplete nature of the game, where it was released with a lot of missing content, game modes, vehicle customizations, and single-player content. This entire game just feels so thin. Problem number 3 is a combination of all the other problems in the game. Number 1, the surprising amount of bugs, glitches, and clipping, riddling an otherwise fairly stable game. Number 2 being that guns are just too precise for the time period of the game. This game feels like the fastest and most Twitch-driven Battlefield game in the catalog. It's not necessarily a problem for functional play because, well, Battlefield has always been a quick game, but it is a problem for anyone looking to have an at least somewhat realistic World War II experience, and I was. Holy shit. Good night. And number 3, there's too much imbalance in Conquest in terms of comeback and player skill. As it stands right now, there's really no balance between teams. Groups of high-level vets are lumped in with noobs at what seems like complete 100% random. Sometimes it makes for very lopsided matches. There's also some anti-comeback mechanics that make that balance worse, such as V1 rockets for high-scoring squads, and the winning team will always have more on average. BF5 is a prime example of a once feature-rich experience getting converted into a live gaming service. Where the maps were shrunk to appease to the casual crowd, the game rushed to the market to make sure it landed before year-end, where content is sparse and future content will eventually maybe round out the otherwise fairly hollow offerings today, but that might not be for a long time. BF5 is not a bad game, it's just symptomatic of a game that needed more time. The gunplay is solid, it looks nice, and the game introduces improvements crucial to balance like limited ammo, health packs, and a rehaul of how reviving teammates works inside and out of squads. In those regards, it's a nice improvement over BF1. But it doesn't measure up to BF4, which is the gold standard, and that's because the map design, weapon layout, progression, and lack of content don't make for a compelling reason to return to it for repeat play sessions. The game can be fun, but it just really isn't for long periods of time. Somewhere along the lines, Battlefield, alongside Call of Duty, Battlefront, and any franchise that's been around this long, has got to get their shit together and make each game better, not worse. Perhaps this is what the future holds for BF5, but I might not be around to experience it, because that experience should be ready at launch, and for Battlefield 5, it just wasn't. I really tried to love this game, but I just can't. I think the big problem with Battlefield 5 is that because it's such a long-standing franchise, people expect really great content from DICE and EA at this point. If you scale down the game, appeal it to the casual crowd, mess up the map design, and make the core experience feel so hollow, you're not going to get players to hop on board with this game for a long period of time, because this is usually not an annual franchise here. So the player base needs to stabilize and grow, or at least decline slowly, as all games do after they release, usually slowly over time, to make sure that by the time the next BF game comes around, there is people still playing this game. That's one of the goals of BF today alongside other first-person shooters. This idea of releasing a game and putting out content over time so that there is at least a stable player base within the intermediary period between new releases. I can see what they were doing with Tides of War. Yeah, it sounds like a good idea on paper, but when the bulk of the game is so thin and just ill-conceived, I don't think adding stuff to a bad foundation is gonna actually make this game one of the best Battlefield games on the market. And that is what we all want as Battlefield veterans. We want the best Battlefield game each and every game, because that's what we deserve for $60 to $100, which is what this game charged at its release. Thanks for watching, guys. I'd love to hear your feedback regarding BF5 and this longer style retrospective-ish thing that I created today. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Let me know down in the comments section, and I hope you guys have a wonderful and lovely day. See you guys next time.